She stood before the mirror and looked at her reflection with that specific expression people get when they are preparing for something unpleasant but inevitable, like a visit to the dentist, or a conversation they have been putting off for a long time. The dress was beautiful. Dark cherry red with thin straps and a softly fitted bodice. She had bought it herself, spending the money she had set aside for 3 months. Not because she could not afford something else, but because she was used to spending exactly as much on herself as she had earned. That was her rule, her little pride. Natalie Nelson, now Natalie Crawford by marriage, was celebrating her 28th birthday today. She did not want a party. More accurately, she did not want this kind of party. She wanted a quiet evening at home. Candles on the table, Andrew sitting across from her, and maybe one good bottle of wine. She wanted to tell him something important, something she had learned 3 days ago at the doctor's office. A secret she had been carrying around inside her like a fragile object in a breast pocket, carefully, barely breathing. Instead, they were going to Barbara Crawford's house. 20 guests, the good crystal from the hutch, and the holiday tablecloth her mother-in-law only brought out for special occasions. A special occasion meant this was not a party for Natalie. It was a party for Barbara. It was an opportunity to gather her friends, show off her son, set a lavish table, and accept compliments for raising such a wonderful boy like Andrew. In this picture, Natalie was merely a detail, necessary, but not the main focus. Are you ready? Andrew peeked through the bedroom door. He was wearing the dark gray blazer she had picked out for him a year and a half ago. It suited him very well. Broad shoulders, bright eyes. She thought fleetingly how handsome he was when he was not nervous. But right now, he was nervous. It was obvious from the way his jaw was slightly clenched. I am ready, she said. Nat? He hesitated. Try not to take things to heart today. Mom says too much sometimes. You know how she is. She looked at him in the mirror. I know, she wanted to say. I have known for 2 years. I know every single time. And every single time, it cuts just like the first. But she only nodded. I will try. They left. Barbara Crawford's house sat on a quiet street in a typical suburban neighborhood, a 2-story home with a front yard where hollyhocks bloomed in the summer. Her neighbors respected her. Her colleagues at the local state college, where she had taught psychology and education for 20 years, considered her a woman of strict principles. In her presence, people involuntarily stood a little straighter. She possessed that specific posture found in people who are accustomed to evaluating others. She had evaluated Natalie during their very first meeting. A short, quick assessment, with a smile on her lips and absolute coldness in her eyes. So, this is what you are like. 2.5 years had passed since then. In all that time, Barbara had never once called her daughter-in-law by her name in front of guests. She would say, our modest girl, or Andrew's wife, or this young lady, always with an intonation that made it clear the young lady fell short. She criticized everything. Natalie's work. Well, interior design. That is not a serious career. That is for people who could not make it in architecture. Natalie's cooking. I do not understand how you can serve chicken like this, without a crispy skin. Natalie's clothes. She is pretty, of course, but she could dress a bit more appropriately. Andrew always reacted the same way to this. He would wince slightly and say, Mom, that is enough, and nothing more. Barbara treated that as enough as empty noise and carried right on. He did not know how to argue with her. Maybe he did not want to, or maybe he simply did not understand how deeply every single word pierced a person when it happened over and over again, year after year. Natalie understood. She had grown up with a father who spoke little but precisely. Michael Nelson never raised his voice. He simply looked at you, and the person he was talking to would automatically start to shrink. For him, words were tools, not weapons. With Barbara, it was the exact opposite. But Natalie had made a promise to herself. She would handle this on her own. No complaining, no calling home, no having her father swoop in to solve her problems. She was not a child. She was a woman who knew how to endure, but who also knew how to wait. Today, she was waiting for the last time. They parked the car at the curb. 3 unfamiliar vehicles were already sitting in the driveway. The guests were gathering. Yellow lights spilled from the windows, and the hum of voices drifted outside. The party has already started, Andrew said, checking his watch. We are exactly on time. Natalie did not reply. She adjusted the strap of her purse on her shoulder and walked toward the door. The entryway smelled of roasted meat and something floral. Barbara loved putting fresh flowers in vases. She was good at that. Two people were already taking off their coats in the hallway, an older woman in burgundy, and her husband with a gray mustache. Natalie did not know them. They let their eyes slide over her and turned away. Natalie. Barbara emerged from the kitchen holding a dish towel, already dressed in her holiday outfit, a dark green dress pinned with a brooch. She was smiling broadly. Well, finally. We thought you got lost. Hello, Barbara, Natalie said. Come in, come in. You know we have Cynthia and her husband today, Rita from the college, Sam and his wife. A full house. She turned to Andrew and hugged him as if Natalie were not even there. Drew, you look wonderful. You have lost a little weight, I think. Mom, he said, everything is fine. Of course it is fine. Come through. The table is ready. They walked into the living room. The table was set richly by Barbara's standards. Crystal goblets, a white tablecloth, dishes arranged with pedantic symmetry. There were about 18 guests, mostly the hostess's friends and their husbands, plus a couple of Andrew's younger colleagues, whose names Natalie barely remembered. The guests greeted the birthday girl politely. Happy birthday, you look great, they said, and immediately returned to their own conversations. Natalie was seated at the far end of the table next to Sam's wife, Chloe, a woman who seemed to spend her entire life simply nodding at everything Barbara said. Andrew ended up on the opposite side, right next to his mother, exactly where she always placed him. The first half hour went smoothly. Barbara bustled about, serving food, pouring drinks, smiling. The toasts were to health, happiness, and youth. Standard, meaningless words. Only once did Cynthia raise a glass specifically to the birthday girl, and that was the only toast where Natalie was actually called by her name. After that, the conversation at the table split into several different streams, and Natalie found herself sitting in silence next to the quiet Chloe. She ate, answered if someone spoke to her, and thought about how she was going to tell Andrew the thing she should have told him 3 days ago. She pictured his face, confused at first, then slowly lighting up. He would be happy. She was almost completely sure of that. Almost, because she was not completely sure of anything anymore. Barbara started talking. It always began imperceptibly. One comment, tossed out casually, as if she were not completely serious. Natalie is a designer for us, she said to Cynthia, who had just asked what her daughter-in-law did for a living. Interiors, you know, little apartments, little rooms. A short pause. She does not have her own office. She works from home. It is very convenient, actually. Especially since I rent a workspace at a co-working studio, Natalie said calmly. 3 days a week. Well, yes. Barbara agreed easily, without arguing. That was somehow worse than if she had objected. Renting is an option too. Cynthia nodded vaguely. How long have you been married? She asked Natalie. 2 years. No children yet? Cynthia, Barbara intervened, using an intonation that sounded as if she were stopping something wildly inappropriate. Why would you ask that? Then, to the table at large, thoughtfully. Though, of course, time is passing. Drew is already 31. When I was his age, I was already walking him to elementary school. A few people chuckled softly, politely. No one had said anything explicitly wrong. But Natalie felt something tighten under her ribs. That tiny, fragile secret she had been carrying for 3 days suddenly felt even more fragile. Andrew looked at her across the table. She met his eyes and gave her head a slight shake. Everything is fine. He looked away. About an hour later, Barbara went to the kitchen to refresh a dish and returned with a bottle of aged bourbon she had pulled from her reserves for the men at the table. The atmosphere grew warmer, voices grew louder. Rita from the college was telling some story about the curriculum committee, and everyone was laughing. Natalie almost relaxed. Almost. Sweetheart, Barbara said, sitting back down in her chair. Her voice was steady and warm. It is how people speak to children when explaining something incredibly obvious. You know, I am looking at you today, and I am thinking you really should put a little more effort into your appearance. I do not mean to offend you, God forbid. It is just that this dress, it is cute, of course, but for a party it is. I like it, Natalie said. Well, of course you like it, Barbara agreed. It is a matter of taste. It is just that when a person has a husband who makes a good living, she could dress a little more decently, not even at his expense. She just spread her hands. You understand what I mean? I earn my own money, Natalie said. Well, that is wonderful. A pause. But still. Next to her, Chloe was quietly examining her fork. Natalie raised her glass and took a sip. She was not drinking bourbon. She had taken water. Andrew looked at her again, and this time there was something resembling an apology in his eyes. She shook her head once more. Then it was time for the real toasts, the ones with speeches. Barbara took the floor first, as she always did. She spoke for a long time, beautifully, breathlessly, about how important family is, how glad she was to see everyone at her table, how her Drew had grown into such a remarkable man. There were exactly 2 sentences about the birthday girl at the very end. And Natalie is with us, of course. We wish her all the best. Cynthia raised her glass. Rita clapped. Cynthia's husband cleared his throat and added something too. Natalie was not listening. She was staring at the candles in the center of the table. There were 3 of them, and one had melted slightly to the side. Then Andrew took the floor. He stood up and cleared his throat. Natalie looked at him. I want to say to Natalie, he began, that I am very lucky. And that Drew, Barbara interrupted with a smile. Do not drag it out. Speak from the heart. He stumbled, looked at his mother, then looked at Natalie. I love you, he said simply. Happy birthday. The guests applauded. Natalie smiled for real, for the first time all evening. He sat down, caught her eye, and gave a small nod. She made a decision. She would tell him tonight. Not here, but at home, when they got back. She would tell him about the doctor, about the printed test results sitting in the side pocket of her purse. She would tell him, and watch how his face changed. But before that could happen, she had to sit here for another 2 hours. The tension returned around 9 o'clock. By that time, the guests had drunk enough that voices had grown loud, and boundaries had blurred. Rita was telling Cynthia's husband something. Sam and his wife were discussing their own matters. Barbara was sitting at the head of the table talking to her friend, leaning in quietly. Natalie caught her own name out of the corner of her ear. She did not try to listen. It was a long-standing habit of hers, filtering out what she did not want to hear. But then Barbara started speaking a little louder. Not intentionally. It was just the bourbon, the evening, the atmosphere. I told Drew even before the wedding. Look at her closely. A girl with no background, no family to speak of, coming out of nowhere. Her job is just a title. I told him to be careful. But Natalie raised her head. The table grew slightly quiet, not because everyone heard, but because silence sometimes falls on its own at the worst possible moment. Barbara, Natalie said evenly. I can hear you perfectly well. Barbara turned to her. There was no embarrassment in her eyes. There was only the slight, irritated squint of someone who had been interrupted. Well, it is good that you hear me. She raised her voice slightly, this time on purpose. I am telling the truth. Everything I say is the truth. Drew works hard, he tries. And what do? You sit around drawing your little rooms and wait for him to support you. I support myself, Natalie repeated, calmly, without trembling. Oh, drop it. Barbara leaned back in her chair. The apartment is his, the car is his, everything is his. And you have set yourself up very nicely next to him, I have to say. Mom, Andrew stood up. Mom, stop. I am telling the truth, Drew, she said, not looking at him. Let her hear it. I have stayed quiet for 2 years. That is enough. This is my house, my party, my son, and I will say what I think. That specific kind of silence hung in the living room, the kind where everyone pretends they cannot hear, even though they are catching every single word. You married him for the money, Barbara said distinctly, without shouting, which was almost worse than shouting. I knew it, the very first time I saw you. You can spot girls like you instantly. You showed up and dug your claws in. A gold digger. Natalie set her glass on the table. That is not true, she said. It is true. It is true. Barbara stood up. She was slightly taller than Natalie, and used it to her advantage now. Do you think I do not see it? Do you think I do not understand? Mom, stop it. Andrew took a step toward her. It is her birthday. Do you realize what you are? Step back, Andrew. She stopped him with a single gesture. Habitual. Practiced over 30 years. I am speaking to my daughter-in-law. She walked up to Natalie. Natalie did not step back. She sat up straight and looked at her mother-in-law without fear, without tears, with the expression of a person who has reached her absolute limit. This dress, Barbara said, looking at the cherry-red fabric with outright disgust. You are trash, and you always will be. Dressing up like this? And she grabbed the thin strap. Natalie did not have time to do anything. More accurately, she had time to understand what was happening, but she did not have time to believe it. It was so impossible, so far beyond any conceivable boundary, that her body simply failed to react in the first second. Barbara yanked. The fabric tore violently at the shoulder. "You only want my son's money," she shouted. "You freeloader!" Someone at the table jumped up. Andrew took a step, but he was at the other end of the long table. Chloe gasped. Rita recoiled. Natalie stood there with a torn strap, holding her dress up with her hand. There were no tears in her eyes. There was something else. Something cold and very quiet. She looked at her mother-in-law and thought, here it is. This is what everything has been building toward for 2 years. The front door opened. No one had heard the doorbell. Everything had been drowned out by the noise. The door simply opened, and a man stepped from the hallway into the living room. He was not tall, but he was broad-shouldered, wearing a dark coat over a suit, holding a small wrapped gift in one hand. He was in his late 60s, with graying temples and a calm, tanned face with deep creases near his mouth. He was the kind of person who was never loud, but who was noticed instantly. Michael Nelson stopped in the doorway of the living room. He saw his daughter. The torn dress, her hand holding the fabric at her shoulder, her perfectly straight back, and those eyes he had known since the day she was born. He saw the woman standing next to her in dark green, her arms still raised, a look of triumph on her face. The wrapped gift was slowly set down on the entryway console. Michael Nelson walked across the living room. The guests parted on their own, not yet understanding who he was, but sensing something in the way he moved. Not fast, not slow. Straight ahead. He walked right up to the table. Next to a serving platter of sliced meat lay a long carving knife with a wooden handle. He picked it up. The living room went dead silent. No one could accurately describe how it happened later. It was too fast, and yet it felt like slow motion. Michael Nelson took one step toward Barbara Crawford. She stepped back half a pace. Instinctively, uncomprehendingly, his hand holding the knife came up, and with one short, precise movement, he sliced through the strap of her dress at the shoulder. Not her skin, not the fabric around it, just the strap. Exactly as she had done to Natalie. The green dress slipped down Barbara's shoulder. She did not scream right away. She just exhaled sharply, as if she had been slapped in the face. "Now you know how it feels," Michael said, quietly, very quietly, so that it could be heard perfectly in the absolute silence of the room. He set the knife down, turned to his daughter, and took off his coat. Slowly, calmly, like a man who is in no rush at all, he draped it over her shoulders. Natalie did not move. She just looked at him. "Let's go," he said, and they walked out. The hallway, the street, the cold November air. Natalie walked beside her father and felt the weight of his coat on her shoulders. It was warm, smelling faintly of wood, and something clean and metallic, like the air at a construction site. She used to wear this coat in childhood when he sometimes took her to job sites, draping it over her own jacket when it got cold. The coat gave her the exact same feeling. "I am here. Nothing will happen." Behind them, Andrew stepped out onto the porch. She heard his footsteps and stopped. She turned around. He stood in the doorway in his blazer, without a coat, pale. He looked from her to her father. "Natalie," he said. She did not answer. Michael turned to him slowly. "Are you her husband?" he asked. "Yes." A pause. "Did you see what was happening at that table?" Andrew did not look away. That was probably the single correct thing he did that entire evening. He did not look away. "I saw it," he said. "And what did you do?" The silence dragged out for several seconds. Somewhere behind the windows of the house, voices were rising. The guests, Barbara, something happening inside. Here on the street, it was very quiet. "Nothing," Andrew finally said. "I did nothing." Michael looked at him for another second, then gave a disapproving nod, simply registering the fact. "Are you coming?" he asked his daughter. Natalie turned to her husband. She did not know yet if she was angry, hurt, or just so exhausted that it no longer mattered. She looked at him and saw the man she loved, and simultaneously the man who had allowed what happened over the last 2 years to happen. "I am going with my dad," she said. "Come over when you are ready to talk." And she walked to the car. Andrew remained standing on the porch, but he did not go back inside the house. Natalie noticed this through the glass as her father's car pulled away from the curb. Andrew stood on the porch and watched them leave. He did not follow her, but he did not return to his mother either. He just stood there. They were silent in the car for a long time. The driver, an older man with an unreadable face, drove smoothly. Streetlights flickered past the window. "How did you know I was there?" she finally asked. "I was driving over to wish you a happy birthday," her father said. "You thought I forgot. You could have called. I wanted it to be a surprise." She almost laughed, but didn't. "Dad?" she said. "What is it?" "I need to tell you something." She opened her purse, reached into the side pocket, and found the folded piece of paper. The one with the clinic's letterhead and the few lines of text that had changed everything 3 days ago. She handed it to him. He took it, unfolded it, and read it for a few seconds in the dim light of the passing street lamps. Then he folded it, handed it back, and stared out the window for a long time. "Have you known for a while?" he asked. 3 days. "Does Andrew know?" "No. I wanted to tell him tonight at home." Another pause. "Is he a good man?" he asked. "Not right now, but in general." Natalie thought about it. "Yes," she said honestly. "He is a good man who is absolutely terrified of his mother." "That can be fixed," Michael said. "If he wants to fix it." "I know." The car stopped at her apartment building. The driver cut the engine. Her father did not get out right away. He sat and looked at the entrance. "I will be around," he said finally. "You know that?" "I know. But this is my life. I make the decisions." He nodded. She opened the door, then turned back. "Dad, the knife." That was intense. He looked at her. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly. "I did not plan it," he said. "I just grabbed the first thing I saw." A pause. Good thing it wasn't a fork. This time she genuinely laughed and walked into the building. At home, she took off her father's coat and hung it neatly by the door. She put water in the kettle. The apartment was quiet. The light in the kitchen was on. Her phone stayed silent for 20 minutes. Then a text came from Andrew. "I am outside. Can I come in?" She stared at those words for a long time, then typed back, "Yes." A minute later, the doorbell rang. She opened the door. He stood there without a coat. He had forgotten it or just hadn't grabbed it. He was freezing, looking slightly lost as he stared at her. "I should have stopped her," he said without any preamble. "A long time ago. Not just today. A long time ago. I know." Natalie stepped back, letting him in. "Come in," she said. "We need to talk." He walked in, and she closed the door. Not loudly, not slamming it, just closing it. Everything that had happened before remained outside that door. Ahead lay a conversation that should have been started a long time ago, and something else he did not yet know about. Natalie set 2 mugs on the table and started to speak. She had brewed the tea strong, the kind you drink when you have no intention of going to sleep anytime soon. She set both mugs on the table, sat down across from Andrew, and just looked at him for a few seconds. He sat straight, his hands clasped on the tabletop. He had not taken off his blazer. His hair was a bit messy from the November wind. "Go ahead," she said. "You first." He nodded and took a breath. "I do not know where to start." "Start anywhere." "I am in no hurry." He looked down at his hands. "I saw it," he said slowly. "Not just today. I saw it this whole time. Every time she said something to you, I saw your face. I saw how it changed. You thought you were hiding it, but I saw it." A pause. "And every time, I told myself, these are just little things. That is just how Mom is. She doesn't mean it maliciously. Natalie will get used to it." 2 years, Andrew," she said. "I know. She has never called me by my name in front of people in 2 years." He looked up. There was something in his eyes that she did not immediately recognize. But then she realized what it was. Shame. Real, unfeigned shame. "I did not notice," he said quietly. "Or I did not want to notice." He did not try to argue. "She made a note of that, too. You are right about one thing," Natalie said. "This could have been stopped a long time ago. Not with yelling, not with a scandal. Just by telling her one single time, firmly, 'Mom, this is my wife, and you will be polite to her.' One firm time, she would have heard it. I do not know how to be like that with her." "I know. That has been the problem from the very beginning." They fell silent. Outside the window, the wind howled. October had lingered this year, and November had arrived angry, with sharp teeth. Natalie wrapped her hands around her mug. "Nat," Andrew said. "What happens now? What do you want?" "Wait." She stood up. "There is something else." She walked to the entryway, picked up her purse, and found the folded piece of paper in the side pocket, the same one that had been burning her hands through the fabric all day. She returned to the kitchen and placed it on the table between them. Andrew looked at the paper, then at her. "What is this? Read it." He picked it up and unfolded it. He read it for a long time, longer than it took to read just a few lines. Natalie watched his face. First confusion, then realization dawning. His face changed slowly, the way the sky changes before sunrise. "It is still dark, but something is already happening." He lowered the paper. 3 days, she said. "I have known for 3 days. I wanted to tell you tonight, at home, after the party." He was silent. "Andrew, I hear you." His voice sounded entirely different. "You went through all of this today, and you were carrying this inside you the entire time while—" "Yes." He stood up from the table and walked over to her. She did not step away. She just looked at him and waited. He hugged her, not impulsively, not theatrically. He just pulled her against him and froze. She felt his breath against her temple. "Forgive me," he said into her hair. "For everything. For today. For the last 2 years." She did not answer immediately. She stood there and thought, here is the moment where I can either choose to believe him or not. She loved this man. That was the truth. He had a weak spot, but that did not make him a bad person. It made him a person with an unhealed wound from childhood. "Do you hear me?" he asked. "I hear you. What do we need to do? Tell me, and I will do it." She pulled back, not pushing him away, just far enough to see his face. "Tomorrow," she said. "Today is just this. Just us. Everything else is for tomorrow." He nodded. "Okay." They finished their tea almost in silence. But it was a different kind of silence. Not the tense quiet that had existed between them in recent months, when every word had to be weighed. It was the silence of exhausted people who finally did not have to pretend anymore. Natalie turned off the light in the kitchen and closed her eyes. Outside, the November wind howled. Somewhere on the other side of town, in a house with hollyhocks and crystal goblets, Barbara Crawford was probably still awake. But that was no longer Natalie's problem. For now, morning began with a phone call. Barbara called at 8 in the morning. Natalie saw it on the phone screen when she walked into the kitchen. The call was for Andrew. She did not wake him. She put the kettle on, took out bread, opened the fridge. The phone on the counter kept vibrating. It stopped. 2 minutes later, it started vibrating again. Andrew appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed, or maybe he hadn't slept at all. It was hard to tell. "She is calling," he said. "I know. I heard." He picked up the phone, looked at the screen, and set it back down. "Later," he said. "First, us." Natalie looked at him. He seemed different. Not like yesterday. Not like the man from the past 2 years. Something inside him had managed to shift overnight. She did not know if it was permanent, but it was there right now. They sat down at the table. He poured his own tea without having to be asked. A small detail, but she noticed it. "I thought about it all night," he said. "We need to talk to Mom. For real. Not like yesterday. Not in the middle of a screaming match. Separately. Calmly." He paused. "I need to tell her myself. Not you. Not your father. Me." "What exactly are you going to tell her? That this is unacceptable. That this is the end. That if she wants to see us, she has to change." A pause. "That we are expecting a baby." Natalie set her mug down. "Are you sure? She is my mother. I have to be the one to say it." She thought for a second. "Okay, but I want to be there. Not to interfere. Just to be next to you." "Yes," he said. "I want that too." Barbara called 4 more times before noon. Andrew did not pick up. It was not easy for him. Natalie saw how he looked at the screen every time before setting the phone back down. The habit of picking up when his mother called was a reflex for him. Right now, he was breaking that reflex manually, intentionally, and it showed. At 12:30, a text came. "Andrew, what is going on? Call me immediately." Then, "That was my house, my party. How dare that man act like that?" Then, "You owe me an explanation." Andrew read the messages, put the phone away, then took it out and read them again. "What is she saying?" Natalie asked, not because she needed to know, but because she saw he needed to say it out loud. "She is demanding an explanation, saying she was insulted in her own home." "I see. She does not understand what happened, or she does not want to understand." Probably the latter. He put the phone in his pocket. "I am going to see her tonight," he said. Alone. First alone. I need to tell her something before we talk to her together. Natalie nodded. Go. He left around 6. Natalie stayed alone. She walked through the apartment, a modest 2-bedroom that Andrew had bought with a mortgage before they met, and which she had gradually made her own. She had rearranged the furniture, picked out the curtains, hung wooden shelves in the kitchen that a carpenter had custom-made from her sketches. Barbara had once said the shelves looked cheap. They looked great. Natalie knew that for a fact. She called her father. He picked up after the second ring. How are you? He asked. I am fine. She walked over to the window. Andrew went to see his mother. A short pause. Alone? Alone. He wants to talk to her himself. That is the right thing to do, Michael said. Dad? She paused. What did you do with her dress? I understand why, but that could have turned out badly for you legally. It wouldn't have. Why are you so sure? There were witnesses who saw what she did to you first. I took the knife from the table. I didn't bring it with me. I wasn't making a threat. I was making a demonstration. There is a difference. A pause. I wasn't born yesterday, Natalie. She laughed, a short, tired sound. I know how you feel. His voice shifted, becoming a fraction more attentive. Physically, I am fine. Everything is fine. Are you eating? I am eating. Dad, don't stress yourself out too much. That is the main thing right now. I am not stressing out. I can hear that you are. She didn't argue. He always knew how to distinguish the truth from what she said in place of the truth. If you need me, call, he said. Anytime. I know. And eat a proper dinner tonight. Dad. What? Thank you. For yesterday. Silence for about 3 seconds. You would have called me eventually anyway, he finally said. Sooner or later. Maybe. Maybe not. You are strong. But that does not mean you have to be alone. Remember that. She hung up and stood by the window for a long time, staring out at the gray November courtyard. Cars below, bare trees, a street lamp that started flickering every evening at dusk, a bulb that should have been changed a long time ago. She thought, everything changed yesterday. Not broke, but changed. There is a difference. Andrew came back at 9:30. Natalie heard him walk in and went out to the hallway. He stood by the door, took off his boots, hung up his jacket. His face was calm but exhausted. The way someone looks after finishing a grueling job. How was it? She asked. Sit down, he said. I will tell you. They sat in the kitchen again, just like last night. Only now, complete darkness lay outside the window, and the city burned with 1,000 lights. She yelled, he said, at first, for a long time, about how she was insulted in her home, about your father, about how I was obligated to stand up and defend her. He paused. I listened. I let her get it all out. And then I told her what I think. For the first time in my life, everything, to the very end. Natalie waited. I told her that she has been humiliating my wife for 2 years, that I saw it and allowed it, that it is my fault too, and I admit it. His voice was steady, but beneath that steadiness, something was being held back with effort. I told her that I will never forgive her for that scene with the dress in front of people, in front of me, that she crossed a line that cannot be crossed. Then she started explaining that she only wanted the best, that I don't understand her, that she is my mother and knows better. He chuckled without any humor. Classic. And I said, Mom, listen to me for once. I am not going to argue about what anyone intended. I am talking about what actually happened. What happened is unacceptable. Period. A pause. And then I told her about the baby. Natalie looked up. She went quiet, Andrew said. For a long time. She just sat there and stayed quiet. What then? Then she said, I want to know my grandson or granddaughter. And I told her exactly how it is. He looked Natalie straight in the eye. I said, if you want to be in this child's life, you change. You don't promise. You don't just try. You change. That is the only condition. She asked. And if I don't? I said. Then we live separately, and we raise the child without you. I am sorry, but that is how it is. Silence. Did she agree? Natalie finally asked. She cried. Andrew paused. I don't know what that means. Maybe she understood. Maybe she just got scared. We'll see. Natalie looked at him, thinking about how that conversation must have been harder for him than she could possibly imagine. 31 years is a long time to live in the shadow of a domineering person who loves you, but loves you in their own way, without ever asking what you need. You did a good job, she said simply. He shook his head. This should have happened a long time ago. Yes. But it happened now. That means something too. He covered her hand with his palm. Everything will be okay, he said. I don't know exactly how, but it will be. She looked at his hand over hers. I don't know either, she said, but I believe you. The next few days passed in a specific mode, the kind that follows a massive shock. Everything feels simultaneously sharper and quieter than usual. Natalie went to work, managed her current projects, met with clients. Life went on. It was both strange and exactly right. On the third day, her friend Harper called. Harper knew about Barbara. Not everything, but enough. They had been friends since college, and Harper was the kind of person who spoke bluntly, and to whom you could speak bluntly in return. I know everything, she said, the moment Natalie picked up the phone. Chloe told me. What exactly did Chloe tell you? That your mother-in-law threw a fit, and some man came in and sliced her dress strap with a carving knife. A pause. Nat? Was that your dad? Yes. Silence for 3 seconds. Oh my God. Harper, wait, just give me a second. Another pause. So this whole time, you were the daughter of exactly who? Michael Nelson? Nelson Construction? Yes. And you lived like this for 2 years. How? I walked away on my own. I wanted to live my own life. Harper was silent for another second. You could have told me, she finally said, not sounding hurt. More contemplative. I didn't tell anyone. It was my decision. I get it. A pause. How are you doing now? I am fine, Natalie paused. Harper, I'm pregnant. This time, the silence was long. Nat, Harper finally said, and her voice held so many things at once. Joy, worry, tenderness, that something squeezed tight in Natalie's chest. Nat, 7 weeks. Everything is fine. Does Andrew know? He knows. And, it's good. We talked for a long time. He realized what he did with his silence. He realized. And what now? Natalie walked over to the window, the same one with the flickering street lamp that still hadn't had its bulb replaced. Now we live, she said. We just live. Barbara Crawford called on the 5th day. Not Andrew. Natalie. Natalie stared at her name on the screen for a few seconds, then picked up the phone. Hello? Natalie. Barbara's voice was different. Not the one from the last 2 years. Stripped of the steel, stripped of the superiority. Just the voice of an older woman making a call and not knowing exactly what she was going to say. I want to talk. I'm listening. Not over the phone. If possible. Natalie thought for a second. Okay, whenever it is convenient for you. Tomorrow, if you do not mind. I don't mind. Come over to our place. A slight pause. I will come alone, Barbara said. Without Andrew. I understand. They met the next day at noon. Barbara arrived without being late. Exactly at 12. She rang from downstairs, came up. Natalie opened the door. Barbara looked different. Older, perhaps, lacking that rigid posture that had always been the very first thing anyone noticed about her. She wore the same coat as usual, but no brooch. Hello, she said. Hello, come in. They walked to the kitchen. Natalie put the kettle on, not because they needed tea, but because she needed to do something with her hands. Barbara sat down, placed her purse on her lap, and stared at the table runner. I came to apologize, she said finally. I'm listening. She stopped and tried again. What I did was wrong. The way I treated you this whole time. That was also wrong. She looked up. I do not know how to ask for forgiveness. I am not used to it, but I understand that I must. Natalie looked at her and thought, here is this woman who has done so many things. Not a villain from a fairy tale, just a person who is used to controlling everything and did not know any other way. It didn't make her right, but it made her understandable. You ruined my dress, Natalie said evenly, in front of 18 people, and you called me a gold digger on my birthday. Yes, Barbara said. Do you know who my father is? I know now. That is not the main thing. Natalie shook her head. I do not want you apologizing just because you found out who my father is. That doesn't mean anything. Barbara looked at her. Something in her face shifted. I know, she said quietly. Drew explained it to me. A pause. He is a good boy. I didn't always understand that. He loves you very much, Natalie said. That is exactly why what you were doing was so incredibly hard for him. He had to choose every single time, and he chose incorrectly. Now he has chosen correctly. Barbara was silent. The kettle boiled. Natalie poured 2 mugs in silence, without asking, and set one in front of her. You are going to have a grandson or granddaughter, she said. That is a fact. What your place will be in this child's life depends on you. I want to be around. Then it is simple. Natalie picked up her mug. Be the kind of person people actually want to be around. Barbara looked at her for a long time, then nodded slowly, like someone accepting a heavy but necessary burden. I will try, she said. Okay. They didn't talk about it anymore. They drank their tea. Barbara asked about her work, carefully, without her previous tone. Natalie answered. The conversation was brief and slightly awkward, like taking a first step after a long period of immobility. Clumsy, but still a step. When Barbara was leaving, she paused in the doorway. Natalie, she said. Yes? The dress. I will buy you another one, if you will let me. Natalie was quiet for a second. There is no need, she said. I will buy it myself. Barbara nodded and left. That evening, Andrew listened to her recount the visit in silence, without interrupting. Will she come again? He asked when Natalie finished. I don't know. That is her choice. How do you feel about her right now? Natalie thought about it. For real. Not a quick answer. An honest one. I don't know if I will ever be able to feel warm toward her, she finally said. Maybe not. Maybe over time. But I am not holding on to anger. Those are 2 different things. Different things, he agreed. The main thing is what is between us, Natalie said. Between us and this baby. The rest will come later. We will see. He took her hand. Outside the window, the streetlights were already on. All of them except the flickering one. It was still blinking. I should probably call an electrician, Andrew said, looking out the window. You should. I will call tomorrow. Okay. They sat next to each other, and outside the window, it was November, and everything was complicated, and everything was unfinished. But something was starting. Slowly, awkwardly, with mistakes, like anything real. Something was starting, and that was the most important thing. Andrew actually did call the electrician the next day. A repairman came in the evening, tinkered with the junction box for 20 minutes, and replaced the bulb in the street lamp outside the window. Now it burned steadily, without flickering. A calm, yellow light that Natalie saw every morning when she walked into the kitchen to put the kettle on. A small detail, but she noticed it. She was noticing a lot of things now. Small, everyday things. Things that used to pass her by. Andrew washed the dishes after dinner without waiting for her to ask. He bought groceries himself, without a list. He remembered what she had been craving over the last few weeks, and just brought it home. One day he came home from work half an hour early and said, I just wanted to be home. She didn't ask why. She understood. The pregnancy at 8 weeks was making itself known. Not severely, but persistently. In the mornings, Natalie woke up feeling as if someone had turned her inside out. It faded by 10 in the morning, and she would go to work. Her clients noticed nothing. Her colleagues at the co-working studio, where she rented a desk, didn't notice either. She worked quietly and meticulously, as always. Only Harper knew. And her father called one more time, a week after her birthday. Not for business, just to check in. The conversation was brief, as usual with them, but Natalie heard in his voice what he wasn't saying out loud. Worry. Careful and restrained, like everything about him. Have you been to the doctor a second time yet? He asked. I have an appointment next week. Is it a good clinic? It is good. If you need me to, I can help you pick a specialist. I have contacts. Dad, I can handle it. I know. But if you need to, tell me. That was their language. He never said, let me do it for you. He said, if you need me to. The difference was enormous, and she valued it. Life was settling into a new rhythm. Uneven for now, with occasional stutters, but a rhythm. At work, everything was familiar, and therefore especially valuable. Natalie had been designing interiors for 5 years. She hadn't entered the profession through an architecture degree, but through fine arts and her own intuition. In college, she studied art history, then took extra courses in spatial design, then started taking small jobs, friends, friends of friends. Gradually, she grew into real projects. Right now, she had 3 active jobs simultaneously: an apartment for a young family in a new subdivision, an office for a small law firm, and a custom home out in the country, where the owners wanted something warm and vibrant, not a cookie-cutter catalog look. The last project was the most interesting. The house sat in a pine forest 45 miles outside the city, and Natalie had driven out there a few times herself, just to sit and watch how the light fell at different times of the day. Work was the place where she remained completely herself. No roles, no expectations, just space, light, material, and the goal of making it so a person actually wanted to live in that place. On the day she returned from the country house project, Harper was waiting for her at the co-working studio. Harper Vance was the kind of woman who walked into a room and the room immediately noticed her. Tall, with red hair that she always swept back a bit carelessly, with a habit of speaking quickly and staring you dead in the eye. She worked as an art director at an ad agency and always knew everything before anyone else. Not because she was nosy, but because she knew how to listen. "You look better," Harper said, looking Natalie over. "Not great, but better than last week. Thanks for the kind words. Sit, I brought you something to eat." She pulled a container of food out of a bag. Something homemade, clearly prepared specifically for her. "Harper, you didn't have to. I did. You need to eat properly right now." She set the container in front of Natalie and sat across from her. "Tell me exactly how it happened. From the beginning, about your dad. I still can't believe it." Natalie opened the container. Inside was roasted chicken with vegetables. Simple and good. "You know the main parts," she said. "I know Chloe's version, who was in shock and told it all jumbled up. I want your version." Natalie ate and talked. She told the story without rushing, in order, not just about the birthday party, but about what came before, about her father, about her decision to leave at 22, about using her maiden name, about Andrew and his apartment, about the custom wooden shelves that Barbara had called cheap. Harper listened in silence, which was rare for her. "You never told me about your dad," she said when Natalie finished. "I didn't tell anyone. Not even Andrew." "Not even Andrew? Was he hurt?" Natalie thought about it. "No. He understood." A pause. "Or he is trying to understand." "That is something, too." Harper looked at her for a long time. "Nat," she said finally, "I am going to tell you something, and don't be offended. Go ahead. You held it all inside for too long. Not just about your dad, about everything. About Barbara, about how you felt. You told me you were fine for 2 straight years, and I felt that you weren't fine, but I didn't push, because you hate when people push. But hear me now. You don't have to hold it in. You are not obligated to handle everything alone." Natalie was silent. "I hear you," she said finally. "Good. Thank you for the chicken." Harper laughed shortly, with relief. "Anytime." Meanwhile, Andrew was doing what he promised. Slowly, but he was doing it. He called his mother 3 days after her visit to Natalie. Not because she asked him to again, but on his own. The conversation wasn't long, but Natalie could hear him through the wall and understood from his tone. He was holding firm, not slipping back into his old habits. "Okay, Mom, okay." He wasn't soothing her when she didn't need to be soothed. He spoke evenly, listened, set boundaries. Then he came into the kitchen and said, "Mom wants to meet with both of us. Invite us over for dinner at her place." "No?" He paused. "I suggested a cafe. Neutral territory." She agreed. Natalie looked up at him. "You suggested that yourself?" "Yes. I felt it was more appropriate." She nodded. "When?" "This Friday, if you don't mind." She thought about it. Friday. 3 days enough time to mentally prepare. Not so far away that she would start overthinking it. "Okay," she said. "Let's go." Andrew picked the cafe himself. A small place on a quiet street not far from their apartment. Not a restaurant, not a pretentious spot. Just a good cafe with wooden tables and proper coffee. Natalie appreciated the choice. Neither of them would be on hostile territory. Barbara arrived early. She was sitting at a table by the window in the same coat, without the brooch she had worn last time. Her hands were on the table. A glass of water sat in front of her, untouched. When Andrew and Natalie walked in, she stood up. Not out of politeness, but because she felt awkward. Natalie saw that. She didn't know how to start. "Hi, Mom," Andrew said. He hugged her briefly, without that habitual, slightly excessive warmth that had previously existed between them. Simple. Adult. "Hello," Natalie said. "Natalie." Barbara looked at her. "Hello." They sat down. The waiter took their orders. Natalie ordered herbal tea and something light. Her stomach had been capricious the last few days. Andrew ordered coffee. Barbara ordered the same thing Natalie did, and Natalie wasn't sure if it was a coincidence or not. For the first few minutes, Andrew did the talking. About work, about neutral things, Barbara replied. Her voice was cautious, like someone walking down an unfamiliar road and not knowing where the ice might be. Then she turned to Natalie. "I want to ask," she said. "How are you feeling?" "Good," Natalie answered. "Thank you." "Mornings are a bit rough," Andrew said, "but it's getting better." A pause. "I want to say something," Barbara said, directly, without build-up, as if she had made up her mind and was speaking before she could change it. "I have been thinking these past few days. Thinking a lot. And I realized—" She stopped. Tried again. "I did what I did because I was afraid. Not of you specifically. I was afraid of losing Drew. He is my only family. And when you showed up, I felt a—" She searched for the word. "A threat. It was wrong. I understand that it was wrong. But that is how it was." Natalie listened. "It is not an excuse," Barbara continued. "I know it is not an excuse. I am telling you why it happened so that you know." "I hear you," Natalie said. You are like him," Barbara said unexpectedly. "Like your father, that same directness. You look at people and you don't look away. I didn't like that from the very beginning." She almost smiled. A crooked, joyless smile. "Because I am used to people looking at me differently. I have been a teacher for 20 years. People look up at me. And you looked at me as an equal. It made me angry." This was probably the most honest thing Barbara had said in their entire 2.5-year acquaintance. Natalie felt it. "I do not know any other way," she said. "I know that now." Barbara paused. "I am not asking you to love me. I am asking you to give me a chance. Just a chance." Natalie looked at her, thinking about the past 2 years, about every word, about every evening she came home, and thought, "Times I will endure it one more time." She thought about the cherry dress with thin straps that she had saved up for over 3 months. It could no longer be repaired. The seam had torn too badly. "You already have a chance," she said finally. "You came here. That is a chance." Barbara looked at her, and for the first time in 2.5 years, Natalie saw neither superiority nor calculation in her eyes, but something else, something resembling respect, small but real. Andrew sat next to her in silence, but Natalie felt him relax slightly. His shoulders, his breathing. "Okay," Barbara said, and she did not return to the topic. They spent another hour in the cafe. They talked about different things. Renovations at Barbara's house, the country house project Natalie was working on, the fact that Andrew wanted to take on more responsibilities at his firm. Nothing vital. Just a conversation between 3 people learning how to sit at the same table. When they said goodbye at the entrance, Barbara paused next to Natalie for a second. She didn't hug her, didn't say anything unnecessary. She just gave a short nod. "Take care of yourself." "You too," Natalie answered. They went their separate ways. Natalie and Andrew walked to the car. He was quiet while they walked. Then, once they got in, he turned to her. "How are you doing?" "I am fine," she said. And it was the first time in a long time that the word was the absolute truth. December arrived with snow. Suddenly, overnight. Natalie saw it in the morning from that same window. The courtyard, the trees, the cars, everything was white. The street lamp over the road burned steadily, without flickering. She stood there with her mug, looking at the snow, and thought about how soon everything was going to change for real. Her body was already changing, unnoticeable to strangers' eyes, but she felt it. Life inside her, not abstract, but entirely concrete, tiny and stubborn. That day, she had an appointment at the doctor's office. A routine checkup, 10 weeks. Andrew took half the day off from work and went with her. In the waiting room, they sat next to each other and flipped through some magazine. Both pretended to read, though in reality, they just didn't know what to do with their hands. Natalie smiled to herself. Andrew noticed. "What?" he asked. "Nothing. Just thought of something." "Something good?" "Yes." He didn't ask what it was. He just accepted it as it was. She noticed that, too. The doctor, a young woman with short hair and confident hands, examined her for a long time, calculating something, noting something down. Then she turned the screen toward them. "There," she said. "Everything is exactly as it should be. Heartbeat is present. Size matches the timeline." On the screen was something small and incomprehensible. Natalie didn't immediately understand what she was looking at. Then the doctor pointed. "See? Here is the head. Here are the little arms." She saw it. Or maybe she convinced herself she saw it. It didn't matter. Something shifted inside her. Quietly, deeply, the way something immensely heavy shifts. Andrew sat next to her without moving, staring at the screen. "Is everything okay?" she asked him quietly, so the doctor wouldn't hear. "Yes," he said. His voice sounded strange. "I am just looking." "I am looking, too," she said. They walked outside into the December snow. Andrew stopped on the clinic steps and stood there for a while, just breathing the freezing air. "I didn't think it would be like that." He didn't finish. "Me neither," Natalie said. They walked to the car. He held her hand. It was cold outside, and the snow crunched beneath their feet. And it was, she thought, one of the best moments she would ever remember. The news of what happened at the birthday party spread through town quickly, not because someone intentionally spread rumors, but because rumors of that nature spread themselves. Chloe told a friend, who told someone else. Rita from the college was a sociable woman and wasn't particularly good at keeping quiet. Within 2 weeks, several people Natalie barely knew called Andrew to interrogate him. "What happened at the party? Is it true some man cut Barbara's coat right at the table?" Andrew gave brief, identical answers. "Family matter. It has been resolved." He said nothing more. Natalie said absolutely nothing. Michael Nelson appeared in the story simply as Natalie's father. At first, his name meant little to the Crawfords' immediate social circle. But Cynthia, the woman who sat at the table, was a curious woman and had managed to Google him that very night. By morning, she had called Rita. By the evening of the next day, Barbara's friends all knew exactly who Michael Nelson was. That changed the tone of the conversations. Natalie found out about this accidentally, through Harper, who heard it from an acquaintance who bumped into Rita somewhere. The chain was long and slightly ridiculous. "They all feel incredibly sorry for you now," Harper reported with dry humor. "They keep saying, 'Oh, that poor girl, how she was bullied, and no one knew.'" "I was bullied regardless of who my father is," Natalie said. "I know. They don't," Natalie shrugged. The opinions of people who had noticed nothing for 2 years and suddenly saw the light did not bother her. Too much of her energy was going into other things to waste it on them. For Barbara, judging by everything, it was harder. At the college, she held an administrative role in the department. It wasn't a teaching job anymore, mostly paperwork, but it carried a certain status in that small community. A few colleagues who used to come to her birthday parties and bring flowers now greeted her with cold restraint. No one said anything directly. The temperature had just changed. Barbara called Andrew about this one time. He listened, then said, "Mom, these are the consequences of your own decisions. No one else's." She was silent on the phone for a long time. Then she said, "I know," and hung up. Andrew recounted this to Natalie that evening. Not with triumph, not with regret, just as a fact. "It is not easy for her right now," Natalie said. "Yes, that doesn't mean she was right. No, of course not. But I still don't take pleasure in it being hard for her." He looked at her. "You are a strange one. You know that?" he said. "In a good way. In a very good way." Michael Nelson came to visit in mid-December. Not a courtesy call. He came with a specific purpose. He called the day before and said, "I will be in your town for business. I want to see you both." Natalie said, "Come over." He appeared in the evening with a small bag, something for Natalie, something for the house. He shook Andrew's hand, calmly, without unnecessary fuss. He looked around the apartment the way a man accustomed to evaluating space looks around. Not critically, just attentively. "The shelves," he said, nodding toward the kitchen. "Mine," Natalie said. "Good work." He paused slightly. "Who made them?" "A local carpenter. Based on my sketch. I can tell." That was everything he said about the shelves, but Natalie heard more in that "times I can tell" times than in any lengthy praise. They sat down to dinner. Andrew cooked. He was cooking more often now, in general. It had become his way of doing something concrete, practical, visible. Michael ate in silence, didn't comment, didn't praise. He just ate. Natalie appreciated this too. Not everyone knows how to accept someone else's hospitality without feeling the need to fill the air with unnecessary words. After dinner, her father remained at the table. Andrew poured tea. Natalie looked at the two men across from her and thought, here they are, both of the important men in my life. Never before sitting right here, side by side at the same table. Are you a good project engineer? Michael asked Andrew unexpectedly. Andrew didn't flinch. He looked up. I am good, he answered. Not bragging, just stating a fact. I specialize in commercial sites. The last 2 years, it has been manufacturing facilities and logistics centers. Michael nodded slowly. I have a project, he said. A big one. I need an engineer who knows how to work under complex conditions, specific topography, dense zoning nearby. My firm can handle it, but I want a fresh set of eyes on a few of the structural solutions. Andrew listened. I am not offering you a job, Michael said directly. I am offering you a chance to look at the problem. If you have something useful to say, we will talk further. If not, that is fine too. Natalie watched Andrew. He thought for about 5 seconds. I am ready to look at it, he said. Good. I will send over the files. They didn't return to the topic that evening. They talked about other things. About the December weather. About how renovations were going on one of Nelson Construction's projects in a neighboring state. About the country house Natalie was designing. Before leaving, Michael stopped in the hallway and looked at his daughter. You look good, he said. Better than last time. Last time I was outside in November with half my dress torn off. Exactly. He put on his coat. Any look is better than that. She laughed. He did too. Briefly, barely noticeably. Andrew closed the door behind him and turned to Natalie. He was testing me, he said, unbothered, more with a sense of understanding. Yes, she agreed. That is normal for him. Yes. He has always been like that. He doesn't ask unnecessary questions. He just looks for himself. She paused. If he sends the files, it means he likes you. He wouldn't bother otherwise. Andrew thought about it. And if he doesn't send them, then he didn't like you. But it isn't the end of the world. Got it, he said, and went to wash the dishes. The files arrived 2 days later. December marched on. The snow melted, then fell again. Natalie drove out to the country house project, handed over the apartment to the young family. They arrived for the walkthrough and spent so much time walking through the rooms that she eventually stepped out onto the landing and just waited for them to finish talking. It was a good sign. The law firm office was being finalized. All that was left was arranging the furniture and hanging the lighting. Life was moving forward. Barbara appeared again. Not unexpectedly, but by invitation. Andrew called her himself. Mom, come over on Sunday. We will have lunch. Natalie was informed and didn't object. On Sunday, Barbara arrived with a small bundle. Knitted things. Baby clothes. Tiny, warm. She set them on the table without an explanation. Natalie looked at them, picked one up, a tiny, cream-colored wool sock. Did you knit these yourself? She asked. Yes. Barbara looked away. I know how. I haven't knitted in a long time, but my hands remember. Natalie set the sock back down and paused. Thank you, she said. It wasn't said with overwhelming warmth. It was just said honestly. Barbara nodded. Just as simply, lunch went smoothly. They talked about the weather, the news, how Andrew was progressing with the files from Nelson Construction. He brought it up himself, without any hidden agenda. It was simply something to talk about. Barbara listened and didn't offer unsolicited advice on his business. When she was leaving, she stopped at the door again. How are you doing right now? She asked Natalie. Fine. Getting a bit tired by the evening. That will pass. The second trimester is easier. Have you talked to your doctor? No, I just remember it from my own experience. Barbara paused slightly. When I was pregnant with Drew, it was the same way. Sick in the morning, exhausted by the evening. But around the 4th month, it felt like I grew wings. Natalie looked at her. It was the first time Barbara had ever shared anything personal with her. Small, but her own. I will wait for the wings, Natalie said. Barbara nodded again and left. Harper called a few days later with an unexpected question. Nat, have you ever thought about opening your own firm? In what sense? In the literal sense. Your own. Stop renting a desk in someone else's co-working space. Get your own firm, your own name, your own space, your own employees. Natalie paused. I have thought about it, she said. But not right now. Why not right now? Harper, I am pregnant. And? Are you planning to just sit around and wait for 6 months? That doesn't sound like you. Natalie didn't answer right away. She really had thought about it. Not often, but she had. The idea of her own design firm had been with her for a long time. Not huge, not with 10 employees. Small, precise, with a clear philosophy. She knew what it should look like. She knew the kind of people she would hire. She even had a name in mind. Not finalized, but the general concept. What stopped her wasn't a lack of ideas. It was something else. I need startup capital, she said. You could ask your dad. No, why not? He is clearly willing to help. Because this is my business. I want to build it myself. Natalie. Harper's voice held a mix of admiration and slight irritation. You are the daughter of one of the biggest developers in the state. Your father's business is literally construction and interiors. It isn't taking daddy's money. It is utilizing a resource that is rightfully yours. It is different for me. No? Fine, Harper sighed. Then let's do it another way. You can start small. Don't rent a big office right away. Start with the projects you are running right now under your own name, your own brand. Registering an LLC is cheap. Make a proper portfolio. You have 3 finished projects, all excellent. Then word of mouth. For the first 6 months, it is just Natalie Nelson, interior design. Then you'll see. Natalie listened. Are you serious about this? She asked. Absolutely. I have seen your work. You are good, Nat. Not bad for a beginner. Good. And you know it yourself. Natalie really did know it. It wasn't vanity. It was simply the understanding that comes after years of honest, hard work. Let me think about it, she said. Think. But not for long, Harper said. You have momentum right now. You are on an upswing. Even if it looks like a crisis on the outside, the truth is, you have never been this free. Natalie hung up the phone and walked to the window. The snow outside was melting. It was a little warmer than yesterday. The street lamp burned steadily. She thought about how Harper was probably right. Change doesn't always mean a fall. Sometimes it is just a new starting point. She talked to Andrew about it that same evening. He listened carefully and didn't interrupt. When she finished, he was quiet for a bit. Do you want this? He asked. Yes. Then do it. It isn't that simple. We need to think about the baby, about money. Nat. He looked straight at her. You have been working for 5 years and you have never once asked me for money. You support yourself. You are talking about opening a firm, not buying a yacht. I am making money. The mortgage is fine. We will manage. A pause. Do it. She looked at him. Are you sure? I am sure you are the best designer out of anyone I know, he said. And I've seen your shelves. She laughed. You said that on purpose. A little, he agreed. She registered the LLC in January. It wasn't complicated. A few documents, a state filing fee, a day of waiting. But after that came everything else. She revamped her portfolio, 3 projects, photos, short descriptions. She asked Harper to help with the copy. Harper wrote it in one evening. Sharp, precise, with no fluff. She built a simple website. Not flashy, but clear. She came up with the name herself. Nelson Interior Design. Her own maiden name. The one she had carried herself, without her husband, without her father's immediate shadow. The one she had left with at 22 to start over. The first call came a week later, a referral from the young family whose apartment she had designed. The wife's friend was also buying in a new subdivision and wanted a good interior. Natalie took the job, then another one. By February, she had 4 active projects, more than she had ever handled at once. She worked from home, with her laptop on the kitchen table beneath her wooden shelves, looking out at the street lamp. In the mornings, she still felt a bit nauseous, but it passed by 10. Her belly wasn't visible under her clothes yet, but she felt it every day a little more. Michael called in early February. Andrew turned in good work, he said without preamble. On the files I sent him. A few very interesting solutions. I am glad to hear that. I want to offer him a spot on the project team for a specific site. Not on staff, a contract for the project. If he handles it, there will be a next one. You need to ask him that. I know. I will ask him. I am telling you because I want you to know. I am not doing this for you. I am doing this because he is a good engineer, and his solutions for the problem were correct. Dad, she said quietly. What? I know. Silence for a few seconds. How are you? He asked. 12 weeks. Everything is fine. Are you eating properly? I am eating, Dad. Good, he said, and hung up. She smiled at the phone. Andrew accepted the contract. He and Michael spoke on the phone. Natalie didn't listen. She went into the other room. It was their conversation, not hers. Later, Andrew came to her. It is an interesting challenge, he said. Complicated, but interesting. Can you handle it? Yes, he said without a pause. I can handle it. She believed him. February was long. The snow didn't melt. A real winter, the kind they hadn't seen much of in recent years. In the mornings, Natalie looked out the window at the snow-covered courtyard and thought about how she wanted this baby. That was important. It hadn't just happened. She wanted it. She wanted times this. She wanted him or her. She wanted this tiny, stubborn creature to grow up in warmth, without fear. By this time, she and Andrew had established a rhythm, a new one, rebuilt from the ground up, free of the old, silent resentments. They talked for real, without talking in circles. Sometimes they argued. That was new, too, because before, she had often held her thoughts back. Now she spoke, and he listened. Barbara visited once every 2 or 3 weeks. Briefly, never imposing, always calling ahead. She never showed up uninvited. That was a rule she had accepted without argument, and Natalie appreciated it. Their conversations grew a little less cautious. Barbara talked about the college without complaining, just sharing. Natalie talked about her projects. Sometimes Barbara offered an opinion on an interior design choice, not with her old intonation of times this is wrong, but more carefully. It seems to me, what do you think? It was an effort, and Natalie saw it. There was no intense warmth between them, not the kind that exists between people who have known and loved each other for a long time. But there was a pact, unspoken but solid. And that was something. In late February, a small event occurred that Natalie would remember for a long time. She was driving to a site, the custom home in the pine forest. The owners had approved the main interior decisions, and now came the final phase. Selecting the details, the lighting, the textiles. Natalie loved this stage, when the heavy lifting was done and all that was left was fine-tuning, like tuning an instrument before a performance. It was quiet in the car. She was driving alone, without music. Outside the window, a snowy forest flashed by, scattered houses, utility poles. Her phone rang, an unknown number. Hello. Hello, my name is Susan Sterling. You were recommended to me as a designer. I am looking for someone for a large project. A custom home, completely from scratch. Are you taking on new clients right now? I am, Natalie said. Tell me more. Susan Sterling explained. The house was 2 hours outside the city. Large, 3 stories, just built. The owner was a woman in her 50s. Specific tastes, but not boring. I want it to feel alive, not like a magazine spread. I want it to be mine. Hearing those words, something clicked inside Natalie. She knew how to make a space feel alive. Let's meet and talk, Natalie suggested. Perfect. Whenever you are free. They agreed to meet the following week. Natalie put the phone down and looked back at the road. Snow, forest, silence. She thought, this is how it works. Not all at once. Not in one grand sweep. One step at a time. One project, then another. One conversation, then the next. One decision, then whatever flows from it. Life is not built with a single gesture. Even one as precise as the swing of a carving knife slicing through 2 years of accumulated tension. After the gesture comes the work. Long, quiet, everyday work. But it was her work, her life, her choice. The house in the woods appeared around the bend. Wood framing, large windows, snow piled high up to the sills. Beautiful. Natalie parked and got out of the car. The freezing air hit her face, clean and smelling of pine. She took a deep breath and walked toward the house. Susan Sterling turned out to be exactly as Natalie had imagined her over the phone. A woman who knows what she wants but doesn't quite know how to name it. That was her favorite kind of client. Not the one who comes in with a magazine and points a finger at a picture. And not the one who says, do whatever you want. The one who has a living, warm, real image inside and needs someone capable of seeing that image and bringing it to life. They met at a cafe. Natalie purposefully suggested the same one where she had sat with Barbara, a neutral place without pretension. Susan arrived with a folder of photographs, shots of the house from the outside, a few floor plans, a few magazine clippings she had clearly been saving for a long time, as the edges were yellowed. I spent 8 years building this house, she said. I put it off, then put it off again. The kids grew up. My husband said, why do you need this? We live perfectly fine right here. Then I decided, enough putting it off. I built it. She paused. Now I want the inside to be exactly what I always imagined. Not overly expensive, not cheap. Just mine. Natalie listened and looked at the photos. The house was good. Wood, high ceilings, a wraparound porch facing the woods. The layout was smart. No wasted corners. Can I go out and see it? She asked. I need to spend time in the space before I suggest anything. Of course. Even tomorrow. They drove out the next day. The house was 2 hours from the city, further than the Pine Forest project. But the highway was clear, and Natalie drove without rushing. Susan was waiting by the gates. Inside, it was freezing. The house wasn't fully heated yet, and it smelled of raw wood and fresh drywall. Natalie walked through all the rooms slowly. She touched the walls, looked out the windows, stood in each room for several minutes just to feel how the light fell. Susan walked beside her and stayed quiet. She knew how to be silent. That was another good sign. In the large living room, Natalie stopped by a window overlooking a snow-covered garden and the woods beyond it. March was already beginning. The snow had settled slightly, hinting at the earth beneath it. It will be very bright in here in the spring, she said. East and south exposure. Sun from 6 in the morning. I know, Susan said. I specifically asked the architect for that. Then we don't need much in here. Just the right materials and the right lighting. The house will do the rest itself. Susan looked at her. That is exactly what I thought, she said quietly. And exactly like that, they had an agreement. The contract was signed a week later. Big, serious, the largest in Natalie's career. She called Harper that evening. Remember when you said I had momentum? She said. I remember. You were right. Harper laughed into the phone, loudly, genuinely. I am almost always right, just not always on time. March brought a thaw. The snow began to melt, slowly at first, then faster. The first patches of bare earth appeared in the courtyard outside the window, and the street lamp now reflected in puddles instead of snowbanks. Natalie was at 16 weeks. Harper had been right about something else, too. The second trimester was easier. The morning sickness was almost entirely gone. Her appetite returned. And with it came energy, that specific, slightly feverish energy, where you want to do everything at once. And that desire doesn't scare you. It brings you joy. Her belly was noticeable now. Not huge, but obvious. Natalie looked at herself in the mirror and felt a little surprised every time. It was her, and simultaneously something greater than herself. At work, everyone knew by now. She told them herself, without hiding it. The owners of the country house congratulated her and told her not to rush the final delivery. Susan Sterling, when she found out, just nodded. That is fine. The main thing is that everything goes well. By March, Nelson Interior Design was juggling 5 projects simultaneously. Not alone. She had hired an assistant, Mia, a young sophomore from a local design program, hardworking and observant. Mia came in 3 times a week, working at a separate table in the kitchen, with the wooden shelves behind her back, doing exactly what needed to be done. She drafted, calculated, sourced suppliers, drove out for measurements. It was a tiny firm, but it functioned. Andrew dove headfirst into his contract project with Nelson Construction. In a good way, he came home energized, talked about the challenges, sometimes laid out blueprints on the kitchen table, and explained topography and load-bearing structures to Natalie. She didn't always understand the details, but she listened because she saw that he needed to. He needed to speak out loud, to think alongside someone else. Michael called her one day, not about Andrew's work, just to talk. He is a good engineer, he said. I already told you that. You did. Now I am saying it again, just in case you didn't understand what it means. And what does it mean? It means he is in for the long haul. Natalie smiled at the phone. Are you going to tell him that yourself? I already did. He turned red. A pause. Strange kid. He just isn't used to hearing things like that. It's okay. He will get used to it, she laughed. How are you? He asked. 16 weeks. I am good. Do you have a name yet? We don't know the gender yet. Too early to tell. He cleared his throat. Tell me when you find out. I will. They found out the gender at the end of March. The doctor turned the screen, traced a finger across it, and said with a smile, It's a girl. Andrew sat next to her and stared at the screen with the exact same expression he had worn back in December. Like he was seeing something he had only guessed existed until now. A girl, he repeated outside. Yes. What should we name her? Natalie had been thinking about it for a long time. Not out loud, just to herself. She had a name that she had been trying on this tiny creature ever since she found out she was pregnant. Violet, she said. If you don't mind. Andrew paused for a second. That is a good name. Do you like it? Yes. He looked at her. Serious, warm, it fits. She nodded. Then Violet it is. They walked to the car through the March City streets. The snow was almost gone. The asphalt was wet and shining, reflecting a pale sky in the puddles. Andrew held her hand. Are you going to tell your dad? He asked. He will be happy. Yes, she said. In his own way, he will be happy. Michael listened to the news in silence. Then he said, Violet Nelson, Crawford, Dad. She will take Andrew's last name. A slight pause. Good, he said. His voice was steady, but she heard what he wasn't saying. Violet Crawford is good, too. Barbara found out they were having a granddaughter during her next Sunday visit. Andrew told her himself. Calmly, over tea, without a long preamble. Mom, we are having a girl. Violet. Barbara set her mug down. For a moment, she stared at the table, then looked up, and Natalie saw something in her eyes she had never seen before. Not joy, in the traditional sense. Something quieter. Something resembling the look of a person who has been given a second chance and fully understands it. Violet, Barbara repeated. A beautiful name. We think so too, Andrew said. Barbara turned to Natalie. Are you feeling well? Is everything all right? Everything is fine, Natalie said. I can help. When the time comes. If you want me to. She said it carefully, without pressure. I know a lot about those first few months. If you need me, let me know. Natalie looked at her, thinking about how, a year ago, she could never have imagined this conversation. How, even 6 months ago, the words, times, if you need me, let me know times, from Barbara would have sounded entirely different, with a different weight, a different subtext. Now, they were just words, simple and honest. Thank you, she said. We will let you know. April arrived with warmth. The country house in the pine forest was finished in the first days of April. The owners arrived for the walkthrough and spent a long time moving through the rooms. They touched the fixtures, sat on the sofa, stepped out onto the terrace. Then the wife found Natalie in the garden, where she was standing and looking at the pines, and simply said, Exactly this. This is exactly what I wanted. Nothing more. This was enough. Natalie drove back to the city on a spring highway. The window was cracked open, letting in the smell of earth and pine. At 20 weeks, her belly was visible even through her coat, and she sometimes rested her hand on it, just absent-mindedly, instinctively. Violet moved sometimes, not strongly yet, barely noticeably, as if someone were tapping from the inside, reminding her, I am here. She thought about how much had changed in these 5 months. That November evening now seemed very distant, yet incredibly precise, as if life had been building up pressure for a long time, and that night, something finally burst. It didn't break. It burst through, like spring water breaking through the ice. She held no hatred for Barbara. Holding on to it would have cost too much. It was something else. A calm, slightly tired understanding that people are the way they are. That behind cruelty, there is often fear. That fear isn't an excuse, but it is an explanation. And that an explanation sometimes helps you not to forgive, but to let go. She had let go. Not for Barbara's sake. For herself. For Violet, who deserved to be born without the weight of other people's wars on her back. In May, Michael came over again, this time with a specific conversation in mind. They sat together, Natalie, Andrew, Michael. Dinner was simple. Andrew cooked, and he did it confidently now, without fuss. Michael ate in silence and watched them both. The way a man watches when he has verified something and is finally convinced. After dinner, he opened the folder he had brought with him. I want to offer you something, he said to Natalie. Listen, We have several residential developments in the pipeline. Large complexes, 100 units or more. We usually bring in outside designers to conceptualize the public spaces, lobbies, courtyards. I want you to do it. Natalie looked at him. Through your firm, he continued. Not as an employee, as a contractor. A separate contract for each site, standard market rates. I checked the market. He placed the folder on the table. The first site breaks ground in 6 months. You will have time to recover after giving birth. If you want to. You can take on less. You can take on more. You decide. Silence. Dad, she said. What? This isn't because I am your daughter. He looked at her dead on. Susan Sterling. She was recommended to you by her neighbor. That same neighbor showed me photos of the country house you finished in April. I looked at them for an hour. A pause. This isn't because you are my daughter. It is because you are a good designer. Another pause. The fact that you are my daughter just means I am telling you this to your face instead of through a middleman. Natalie was silent for a few seconds. I need to think about it, she said. Think. You have until tomorrow. He nodded. Andrew sat next to her in silence. He knew how to stay quiet at the right moments. That was new in him, too. When her father left, they sat in the kitchen for a long time. Since that morning, Mia had left a few sketches on the table for Susan Sterling's project. Final refinements. Natalie stared at them absent-mindedly. What do you think? Andrew asked. I think he is right. It is a good offer. And I will take it. She paused. But Violet comes first. First, everything settles down, then work. Right. You don't think I should have turned it down on principle? Andrew looked at her with slight surprise. No. Why? He is offering you a job because you deserve it. Turning down good work out of principle is stupid. Mom spent 2 years saying design wasn't a real profession. Mom was wrong. He said it without anger, just as a fact. And by the way, she realizes that now. She recently told me, Natalie does very good work. She said it exactly like that. Natalie didn't answer. She just looked at the sketches. A minute later, she said, Call her tomorrow. Invite her over for next Sunday. I will call her, he said. Summer started earlier than usual. By late May, a heat wave had settled in. Natalie walked through the city in a light dress, with a very real, round, warm belly, catching the glances people throw at pregnant women. Not all identical, but often with that mix of tenderness and recognition that says, I went through that too, or times I will go through that, or simply times. Here is the most important thing. The firm was running. Mia came in every day now, sometimes staying late. Natalie watched her and thought, she is going to be a good designer. I just need to give her more independence. Susan Sterling's project wrapped up. The final visit was the final act. Susan walked through all 3 floors in silence, then stepped out onto the porch and stared at the woods for a long time. Natalie stood next to her and also stayed quiet. It was the kind of silence where everything has been said, and words are no longer necessary. Thank you, Susan finally said. It was a good house, Natalie answered. It was easy to work with because it is alive. You understood that right away, Susan said. Not everyone understands that. They drank iced tea on the porch under the smell of pine and talked for another hour. Not about work. About everything. Susan talked about her kids. About her husband, who still didn't understand why she needed this house, but had come for the housewarming and said, It is nice. Natalie talked about the firm, about Violet, who was moving noticeably now, sometimes right in the middle of client meetings, while Natalie pretended nothing was happening and just smiled. You will be a good mom, Susan said. I am trying to prepare for it, Natalie replied. You don't need to prepare. It comes on its own. Susan smiled maternally, with the weight of experience. The main thing is not to be afraid. June, 28 weeks. Natalie scaled back her workload, not because she was tired, but because she made a choice. She needed to protect these last 2 months. Mia managed the ongoing projects independently under her supervision. Natalie reviewed sketches, left comments, and only drove out for critical meetings. She and Andrew moved. The 2-bedroom apartment with the mortgage had gotten too tight. Not physically, but in some other way. They both felt it at the same time and mentioned it to each other on almost the exact same day. They started looking at options. They found a 3-bedroom in the same neighborhood, 1 floor higher, with a view of the park instead of the courtyard. It had space for a nursery, space for her workspace, space to just breathe. The move took a weekend. They didn't let Natalie carry anything heavy. Andrew, Harper, and Harper's husband, whom she brought for muscle, did the lifting. And unexpectedly, Michael showed up. He just arrived and started helping, silently, without warning, as if there were no other way. At one point, Natalie saw him next to Andrew. They were moving a large wardrobe together, exchanging short, business-like phrases. No fluff, just two men doing a shared task. She stopped in the middle of the hallway with a box in her hands and just watched them. Then she kept walking. The wooden shelves were hung up on the very first day. Andrew did it himself, based on her design, having practiced it 3 times already. They went up in the new kitchen as if they had always been there. Michael took a look. "The same ones," he said. "The same ones," Natalie agreed. He didn't say anything else, but she saw it. He was pleased. Barbara came to help set up the nursery. She brought knitted clothes, a continuation of the ones she had brought in December. Tiny sweaters, a hat, all cream-colored and white, neutral for a girl. Natalie picked up each piece and looked at it. Barbara knitted well, even, neat, with a love she apparently didn't always know how to express in words. "You managed to get a lot done," Natalie said. "I have had more free time lately," Barbara said. "I reduced my hours at the college." "Why? 20 years is enough, I suppose." She paused. "I am thinking of retiring by the fall." Natalie looked at her. Barbara was 57. Not old, but not the time when a person suddenly decides to leave a job they love for no reason. "Did you enjoy teaching?" Natalie asked carefully. "I did." Barbara adjusted the little sweater resting on her lap, but I realized it is time to focus on other things. A pause. "I will be needed here, if you want me." Natalie heard the truth standing behind those words. "I want to be needed. Not like before, not through control, not through giving orders. Just needed." "You will be needed in a different way," Natalie said. Simply. Without the extra baggage. Barbara nodded and began folding the clothes back into her bag, neatly, one after the other. Her hands weren't shaking, but there was something different in her movements compared to the first time she had come to apologize. Back then, it was tension. Now, it was a quiet, careful relief. Violet was born in early August. Early in the morning, when the city was still asleep, and a gray pre-dawn sky hung in the window of the maternity ward, Andrew was there. He held Natalie's hand and didn't say anything unnecessary. He was just there. That was enough. Everything went well. The doctors said, healthy, big, loud. Natalie lay there and stared at the ceiling for a few minutes after it was all over. She just lay there and breathed. Inside her was something so massive and quiet that she didn't have a word for it. Then they placed a small, warm creature on her chest. The creature immediately began sniffling, and the word found itself. Home. Not a place, not an apartment, not a house in a pine forest, or Susan's 3-story custom build. This time's was home. The thing you carry inside you, which now comes out and looks back at you. "Hi, Violet," Natalie said. Violet sniffled. Andrew looked at them, and Natalie couldn't see his face, but she heard his breathing, and that was enough. Michael arrived that same day, closer to the evening, when Natalie had already been moved to a recovery room. He walked in quietly, as always. He looked at Violet for a long time, with that expression Natalie knew well, evaluating. Not critically, just looking and understanding. "She looks like you," he finally said. "Andrew says she looks like him. He is wrong." A pause. "She has your eyes, looks at you exactly as directly." Natalie laughed quietly, so as not to wake Violet. "She was just born, Dad. She isn't looking directly at anything yet." "She is," Michael said with absolute conviction. He didn't stay long. No more than half an hour. Before leaving, he stopped by the door and turned to Natalie. "You did good," he said. "With what exactly?" she asked. "With everything." He paused slightly. For him, this was an entire speech. "For not calling me sooner and handling it yourself. For calling me when you needed to. For lifting your head up." A pause. "For the firm. The firm is just getting started." "I know. It is a good start." He left. Natalie stared at the closed door, then looked at Violet, who was sleeping with that deep peace found only in the very young and the very old. Then she took out her phone and texted Harper. "Violet is born. Everything is fine." Harper replied a minute later with a single word and several exclamation points. Then, "Coming tomorrow. Bringing food." Natalie texted back. "Bring it." Fall arrived imperceptibly. Violet was 6 weeks old when Natalie went out for a walk alone for the first time. Just to walk around the block while Andrew was home. The air was cool and clean. the leaves starting to turn yellow. She walked slowly, without a destination, thinking about nothing in particular. She stopped by the window of a small fabric store and looked inside. For no reason, she saw a cut of thick linen, a dark cream color, almost exactly the color of the socks Barbara had knitted. She bought it. She didn't know why. She just wanted it. At home, she draped the fabric over the back of a chair. It hung there for a few days, and then she realized. For the nursery. A small detail. A curtain for the little window. She sewed it herself. A little crooked, but no one saw that except her. Violet watched her from the crib with the exact expression Michael had accurately described. Direct. "You're right," Natalie said out loud. "Crooked. But it is okay. We will learn over time." Natalie took her first contract with Nelson Construction when Violet turned 3 months old. She didn't rush. The site was purely in the design phase, and her involvement at this early stage required more thinking and talking than driving and doing. She thought and talked from home, with Violet nearby, who mostly slept or ate. By this point, Mia was running 3 projects independently. Natalie checked in, made corrections, but far less frequently than in the beginning. The firm was running without her. That was a very good sign. Barbara came over twice a week to help with Violet. Not imposing, not giving orders. She just came in, took her granddaughter in her arms, and did what she knew how to do. Fed her, rocked her, murmured something quiet. Violet was not afraid of her. Natalie watched them and thought, here it is. This is what could have been from the very beginning, if fear hadn't clouded her eyes. But it doesn't matter anymore. What was, was. What is. One day, in October, when the leaves had gone completely yellow, and the park outside the window had turned gold, Natalie stood in the kitchen and looked out the window. The street lamp burned steadily. Violet was sleeping in the next room. Andrew had driven out to a site. He traveled for site visits once a month now, overseeing construction on his contract with Nelson Construction. He came back different. Not better or worse than before, just more himself. On the table lay the sketches, her own, for a new project. Next to the sketches sat a mug of cold tea and a small knitted sock of Violet's that had fallen out of the laundry basket. Natalie picked up the sock and turned it over in her hands. Cream-colored. Even stitches. Barbara's work. She set it back down on the table next to the sketches. She picked up her pencil. Work was waiting. She drew the first line on the paper. Confident, freehand, without a ruler. That was how she always started. Not with calculations. Not with schematics. With a single line that knows exactly where it is going. Outside the window, it was October. A steady street lamp. Violet softly sniffling in the next room. Everything was in its place. Natalie drew a second line and got to work.